This is the Unfinished Relationship Podcast.
Welcome to part 4 of my podcast. Don't mind the background noises. This is more guerrilla recording. I'd rather just record it while I can. What you can hear are the kids next door monkeying about. I just don't have the heart to tell them to shut up. Anyway, onwards and upwards of my story. So where'd I got to? Right. So my ex-wife, February 2023, whilst in court for the non-molestation mentioned in episode 1, I'd been asked a question which was basically to come up with some suggestions of how we could arrange our living arrangements going forward. And I put forward a suggestion that perhaps it would be a good idea for me to move into a property my ex and I had bought not long after we'd met. It was a property which was registered in her name, but at the time she was in university, so I had put down the bulk of the deposit with the intention of swapping the property over into both our names or into a trust for the children. As would transpire, a year or two before the whole relationship blew up, when I did approach her to say, right, let's start moving that property into a trust, she was adamant that she would not do it. She wasn't going to move the property into a trust. I don't know what she feared, but I said, well, it's in the best interests of the children, because at least then they'll have something. If anything happens to us, if we go bankrupt or whatever, it doesn't really matter. Let's do things for the benefit of the children. And she refused. So I didn't know. So anyway, that's the background of that property. So I put that property down and I said, look, I can move out where I'm currently staying. She can move back in if she wants, and I'll move into that property. At which point, and I put that in a written suggestion, which my barrister took to her barrister, and her barrister came back and said, that property has been sold. Imagine my shock. Yes, she sold the property behind my back. Fortunately, the sale had not yet completed, so I was able to arrest that. But as a result, we had to go to court. You see, more waste of money, all because she just wouldn't sit down and talk. So just sitting down and talk, we could have talked. Yeah, it would have been acrimonious, but at least we'd talk and thrash things out. Anyway, so what happens? We are back in court in February 23. We're back in court to discuss the property because the court had essentially also agreed to put a freeze on it. I had already alerted the estate agents to the fact that there were other interested parties who may not be named on the title deed, but definitely had an interest in the property. In the UK, one of the things one might want to know is that it's very important when you own property. If somebody does work on your property or contributes something to your property, it could be anything. It could be curtains. You'd either need to get it in writing from them that they give you those curtains free and clear, or those curtain rails free and clear, or you pay them for it. Because tomorrow they could turn around and claim that they have a vested interest in the property. Unfortunately for me, in this particular instance, that's what worked in my favor. I was able to produce receipts of works done which I had paid for on that property to prove the fact, because most of the paperwork from the banking paperwork from when we bought the property 15 years or whatever it was earlier, I couldn't find, and the bank could not produce the information. But I was able to produce, receipts for invoices and receipts from plumbers, electricians, etc. over the years, works that I'd had done on the property. So that piece of knowledge kind of saved me. Anyway, so we went to court and to discuss the property. And it then came to light that she had, yes, the property had been sold. It had got a buyer, but the buyer was now on hold because of the court action, of the actions I had taken, and now this court action. And the judge basically asked me the question of what would I want to do? Do I want to hold on to the property until the end of this divorce proceeding, which I did not know how long it was going to run for, or was I prepared to let it go? She came back with an answer that she had debts. Things are about to get crazy. So it transpired that my ex-wife had been, at least in the latter half of our relationship, had been siphoning off funds from the house money I was giving her, not only to look after herself but to look after the children. She'd been siphoning off funds and sending them off to the religious charlatan I mentioned in the previous episode. It got to the point where this, in inverted commas, church, I'll refer to it as a cult going forward. This cult, which believes in prosperity gospel, had gotten her involved in a number of businesses, and she had been funneling money to fund those businesses. I don't know for what end. And it had all been done under the counter. I didn't know. And she had, in the UK, again, remember I'm in the UK. In the UK, it is possible to go to the bank and get loans of up to 25,000 unsecured on just your banking activity. That is possible. They will lend what they consider to be reasonable based on how much money they see coming into your account. And into her account, they were seeing a reasonable amount of money coming in. And she was borrowing anyway, I don't know, 2, 3, 4,000 from the bank. And when she had decided to move out of the home, I don't think she had done the maths properly. And, or at least there was an expectation that she would sell this property, pay off her debts. And now we're in court, and she's now being asked to tell us exactly what's going on. At which point it comes out that she owed the banks almost £10,000. I was to later discover it was closer to 8, but anyway, £10,000 she owed the banks. And this £10,000, from what I was able to see, was money which had been, for the most part, sent off to this religious charlatan and and others of his ilk. So she now had this property. She wanted to sell the property, and I don't know, maybe she was going to find Xanadu on the other end. I couldn't tell you if I tried. What the thinking was, it just don't make no sense to me. Clearly, I did not know my partner, but hey, I can't blame anybody. I chose her, so the buck kind of stops with me. So and the judge asked her how much money he felt she needed. She felt she needed £22,000. So out of the money of the sale, which was going to happen because I'd agreed to the sale, she would deduct 22,000, and the rest of the money would go into escrow. It was it was a painful revelation, a very, very painful revelation to hear these things coming out, that there had been so much sneaking and creeping. It wasn't the relationship anymore. I mean, at least if you don't like me, you can at least, do your thing. But to steal from your own children, how does that work? Stealing from your own children. Because then, as far as I'm concerned, that's what it boils down to. To give to a religious charlatan who's driving around in the latest BMWs and Rolls Royces, and you're driving a 10-year-old Volvo your husband bought for you. But hey, it made perfectly logical sense to her. It didn't make any sense to me. So that property later did go on to sell, and it was sold, I think in about May, June, that property went. And then following on to that, the revelation of the debts and so on and so forth, they moved back into the neighborhood from the shelter. They had been taken to a shelter which was almost 30, 40 miles away from where we were. My children being put into a women's shelter, and I do not know what my children saw in that place. Women with all sorts of issues. People in shelters are not nice places, and I think women who deliberately take their children into those kind of places rather than just having it out at home with their partner or getting people round and trying to sort things out. I do not know what possessed her, but anyway, that's what she did. And they moved back into the local area. They're now about 4 or 5 miles away. Moved back into the local area, and they went back to their schools. But I didn't see my children face to face for almost. I went from December to about June. June is when I got to see my children face to face, and even then, I could only see them at a distance. And the circumstances surrounding that are. I got an email from the children's school, because the children's school said, I was still the parent. That's never gonna go away, not until I die. And even if I do die, so what? I'm still the parent. So the school sent out a notification that they were going to be having a summer sports day at the school. So I thought to myself, well, my kids are going to participate in that. There's no way they're not going to participate in that. So I am going to go see my children. So I went to the school and I sat in the bleachers and I watched my kids performing while I sat in the bleachers. It was a good day. It was a nice sunny day. And then I happened to spot their mother, who apparently had spotted me first and had gotten on the phone to call the police. And when I didn't approach my children, I just waved at my children. My son didn't know where to look. My daughter waved back, but very uncertainly, clearly, troubled. My youngest daughter was not there because this was a sports day for the older kids. But yeah, it was very disheartening, very, very painful. But anyway, we wound up. She called the police, as I was to later read in some police transcripts. Some months later, the police basically said to her, well, is he doing anything overt? And she said no. And they said, well, call us when he does. I mean, there's nothing I can say to that. There's nothing I can say to that. Just because I turned up suddenly, I'm a threat. But I guess there's a narrative she has to stick to. And she has to stick to that narrative because she started making this story. Now she has to stick with whatever story she's told herself or told other people. She's got to stick to it. Anyway, so that again in February, March, we were back in court. This time I was fighting now for access to my children. I wanted to see my children. Social services had moved on to another social worker. I never did meet this one either. I had a very brief conversation with her, like 20 minutes, and that was it. In court, and the mother made arguments for no access. She didn't want me to see the children. She didn't want me interacting with the children in any way, shape, or form. She was absolutely adamant that I was a danger to the children, but when asked to provide how I was a danger to the children, she could not. She could not. And as I've mentioned before, if you read any of the social services reports, the early ones state that the mother has no issues with the father and the children, and then the later ones, it's the children love being around their father. So I'm not quite sure how it was all about access. And as far as I'm concerned, it's all driven by money. At the end of the day, the less access I have, then the more rights she has to demand maintenance payments. Of course, it's all about the bag, really. Even though the money's going down the drain because of me now having to go to court rather than sitting down. I had invited several times. People might say, but why didn't you invite her several times. I invited her through lawyers. She either didn't respond or she responded in the negative with responses like, well, we'll meet each other in court. So we were in court. The court disagreed that I couldn't have access. The social worker suggested that I have letter writing access to the children. And so from February the 11th, oh, sorry, not from February, forgive me. From March the 11th, I wrote letters to my children. And they were hand delivered by someone who I had developed some trust in and who I knew would see my children every day. So I would write letters once a week. She would take them, deliver them to the kids, and the kids would send back their own letters. Sometimes one line, sometimes a whole paragraph. It really just depended on what the kids' moods were, but I didn't care. At least my kids wrote back. The kids were later to tell me that, some things which I'd sent to them through that postal system, the mother threw in the bin. But I had made it a point that the lady who would deliver the mail to my children had to make sure that she handed the mail to the children, not to the mother, because I didn't trust her. And this went on, this back and forth with the letters that went from March right through to I think it was September. I still have all those letters. I kept all those letters. The letters I sent are all digital, but the letters they sent back, I have them, the hard copies, and I have photocopies of those letters. Very important to me. Social services, that was their suggestion. Well, start of a 10. They didn't know what they were dealing with, and I guess they were trying to be cautious. But at the same time, there was no evidence, any way, shape, or form that my children, I was a threat to my children. But as a result, yes, as I said, I didn't see my children from December until June, and even then, I didn't get to touch my children until almost August. I think of August, September is when I finally got to actually touch my children physically. But to somebody in this somewhat tragic drama, this was the right thing to do. Why? I do not know. And I probably never will know, and I'll probably never be told the truth. But anyway, so that's my episode 4, I think. I hope it's insightful to some of you. The lessons learned are, just check everything. If you're going through the divorce, check everything. Check your assets, check the paperwork, check for everything, because you just don't know, especially if it's acrimonious. If it's a civilized divorce, 6 weeks in the UK, 6 to 8 weeks. It's a civilized divorce, 6 to 8 weeks. Mine took over 2.5 years because she would not just sit down and talk. The fastest way to get over a divorce or get through a divorce is to talk. And it's the best thing for all parties concerned, children and the adults. But my children had to be put through this, and it's clear that they've been in some way damaged. But I've got, what time I have to fix that, or as best I can. Anyway, I hope you found this interesting, and have a good day, good night, good evening, good morning.
Don't forget to like and subscribe.